Hey, it's Edward, and they say people are 80% water. In this century, people are more of a 80% coffee or 80% caffeine. What we consume that comes from the outside, that stimulates us a certain way or makes a certain substances being produced in our system, whether it's medicine, whether it's drugs, whether it's stimulants containing coffee, whether it's some sort of plants that we are consuming. All of that turns us into particular type of people, puts us into particular state. And in this century, the most common stimulant is coffee or any other drink that contains caffeine, so that people become 80% caffeine, and then in many cases it's also 20% alcohol. So throughout their life they are never who they truly are. When people are never who they truly are, people do stuff that they don't actually want to do. And when we do stuff that we don't actually want to do, we're building the world that we don't want to be living in. This is the reason why people are spending so much time with the nature, when people enjoy plants, why people enjoy animals, why people enjoy spending time with children. Just because all of that is natural, all of that is untouched, all of that is pure, and we feel the desire to interact with it. But adults don't like to spend time with one another. Yes, there are friends do spend time with one another, but how many people you see that are interacting with one another in the public situations? In some countries like that, like Spain and Portugal and Croatia, people are more open, but you can still see that there is a disconnection between those individuals, and unfortunately those countries are usually less developed, as they call them, and the countries that are considered more developed, meaning technologically developed, the system is better developed, but not the human beings. In those countries, people interact with one another even less, and that's the kind of countries where people also rely more heavily on caffeine and alcohol, because how it's very common to exist in our current world. During work, throughout the working day, from the moment person wakes up till the moment they finish work, they keep stimulating themselves with caffeine, so that they feel stressed, they get higher amount of cortisol, higher amount of adrenaline, and they are basically mimicking the environment of danger for themselves. Because if a human being is not in danger, there's no motivation to do anything. We would want to just stay at peace in one spot without moving anywhere, and then it would be harder to sell anything to us, even cars, because cars are not about being, which we are, human beings. Cars is about getting from A to B. It's about speed of transportation between the two places, which is not something that is natural to us. And you can see that people, unless they're having a lot of fun and they are feeling super excited because of the high speed driving or loud music that stimulates them immensely, people don't really enjoy that much driving in a car. It can feel good when you have a car that some other people don't have, but they would want to have, and you're driving around and you can feel good, but this is not something that those people were seeking when they were trying to buy a car. Everyone is seeking just happiness, and happiness is, for human beings, it's just being, it's not going anywhere. And coffee makes us want to get somewhere. Same thing with rushing. rushing. The reason why people rush is because they don't understand that everything that they need is already here in this particular present moment, and they allow the external circumstances, whether it's an employer, other people, timetables of public transport, or intercity, intercountry transportation like planes and trains. They allow those external factors to act upon them and turn them from human being to human chasing, human rushing, not being satisfied in a moment. And you can actually even see it in the airplanes. If you ever traveled in the economy class, do it if you haven't, but if you have, which probably you did, as soon as the plane lands and the sign of having the seatbelt on goes off, people immediately jump and they try to leave the plane as fast as possible, even though nothing would really change for them doing that. Somebody may say, yeah, there's taxis waiting, there's something else waiting, and so forth, but this is just a lame excuse. People are booking taxis and stuff like that so that they have to rush, because they are so used to rushing everywhere, including in their life. And the only place where they feel at peace is in nature, or in solitude, or with the people that they feel comfortable with, being in the same, let's say, house, without needing to pretend to be somebody else, which is another thing that human beings really like to do in this age. Put on the mask, try to be nice, which takes a lot of effort and a lot of energy. And this is the reason why people who like to label themselves as introverts, they say that they recharge when they are alone. It's not like they recharge when they're alone. It's not that is not the reason why they are introvert. They label themselves as introverts because they are unable to interact correctly with other human beings. They don't understand what the interaction is, how it is happening, and what are the important parameters and qualities of it. So they interact in a way that makes them tired. Whereas if you know how to interact, if you have learned that, if you have taught yourself, in case you haven't managed to learn it when you were a child, the first 7 years of life, when your parents were not trying to make you sociable. Human interaction is a skill that we have to have, and if a person doesn't know how to do that, then the simple manifestation of that is a person being nice or trying to be somebody that they are not, thinking that it's going to make another person feel better, when in fact it's not going to make them feel better. It's going to reinforce the belief of another person that they also need to be nice to somebody else, because it's a common trait way of behaving in the society, when in fact what human beings enjoy the most is authenticity. It's when somebody is able to affect them on the deep levels, when somebody is able to understand them, and that's where the importance of awareness comes into play. We cannot learn any skill, especially social skill, without having a good awareness. And coffee is something that makes it more complicated for people to be aware of what is happening, of how they feel, of what's going on in the interaction, of what they need to do, of how they can make positive impacts on other individuals. So 80% caffeine, and after having at work, after having spent their time rushing, trying to get something done, something they don't want to get done, something they're not interested in getting done. By the way, coming back to the previous videos about the definition of slaves, doing something that you don't want to do just to be able to survive, so nobody kills you off, which has nothing to do with whether you earn money or not. Even if you have millions, you may still be a slave. But we talk about the caffeine in this video. Let's touch upon this subject in a different video. People have high level of cortisol, high levels of adrenaline. People get too much in their head, because that's what happens when we have high levels of cortisol and adrenaline. Our body, our brain starts to think that we are in danger, and the only way we can get our body starts to think that we are in danger. Body has control over the brain, and the brain then starts to be engaged even more, so that we can get out of danger, because that's the only purpose of the brain. There is no need to have brain for any other reason. If we just bring it back to where human beings started using brain so much as they use, that led eventually to the situation that we have right now. So in the past, where after we have managed to make life on this planet relatively safe, and we didn't need to fight the tigers and the bears all the time, at some point human beings started using their brain more, whether it's during the Industrial Revolution, during the agricultural times, or during the technological revolution. We started using our brains more to mimic that we are in danger. And the more coffee we drink, the more caffeine we consume, the more we get into our head, if we are using it. So if we are drinking caffeine when we are relaxing, it works a little bit different on us. It doesn't necessarily make us go into our head, even though it engages the brain more, because again, cortisol and adrenaline, that's just the way it works. But it's not that big of a problem if we drink it when we are relaxing, when we are not working with our brain. But when we are working with our brain, it puts us on our head, and after having spent the entire day working, the only solution that human beings who have poor awareness have is starting to use another stimulant. Well, actually, this is not a stimulant, or it's rather a stimulant, something that turns off the human's brain. And actually, it doesn't really turn it off. It just draws the attention away from the human brain. It turns it off temporarily, but once the effect of the alcohol starts to fleet, all the thinking, all the focus on the brain, on the doing, it comes back. It's a really short-term solution, and we live in this world where people are first stressing themselves immensely, then trying to escape that stress, stressing themselves immensely, trying to escape that stress, and they get into that kind of cycle. And once in a half a year, or some people maybe get a little bit lucky, for a couple of weeks they're able to stay without that completely. And even a lot of people, even during the vacation, they consume caffeine and alcohol because of the habit, or because of the, just again, poor awareness and not understanding how to use caffeine and alcohol correctly, and whether they even need to use it. This is an extremely fascinating times to have a good awareness, because when we spot such little things that human beings are performing. And I encourage and beg you to do your best to try to stay away from such environments where people constantly stimulate themselves and they are not being themselves. Because if we are either consumed by coffee or alcohol, we are not being who we truly are. Yes, alcohol makes us more of who we are, but it takes away it masks all the problems that we have. So to me, being 20% of the time who you are while being under the influence is not the most beautiful and wise approach to life. And we all need to strive to not be a part of those environments. And the last thing that should be on our mind is trying to have money in the system where we don't need to have a lot of it, especially if we're living in the European countries and USA and other developed countries, Singapore, Japan, Australia, etc. We don't need to work a lot, we don't need to think a lot, we don't need to be in the environment that we don't want to be. But the problem is that if we are in such environments, it's very hard to understand that we actually don't need all of that. People who earn 3, 4, 5 and more thousands of euros per month, they don't really need that amount of money if they're being enslaved, if they're not being free, working on their own purpose, something that they truly, deeply, viscerally desire. They don't need that, but unfortunately they don't understand it because they got so caught up into doing that and doing and doing and doing. And the more they do those kind of activities that we talk that they don't want to be doing, that they are lost doing, the more money they need to spend to try to bring themselves back to a healthy state. And it will be, again, it will be alcohol, it would be loud parties, it would be massages, it would be money spent on restaurants in order not to waste, not to spend time cooking, because it is extremely unenjoyable to cook if a person is not present. It's the last thing that we want to do when we are not present and when we are stressed. We want to just rest, and we want to have everything that would help us to maintain, or rather help us to survive this dreadful time of our lives of doing incredibly insane things. We want to everything to be done for us. We don't want to train and exercise on ourselves. We need a coach that would do that for us, would tell us what to do. We don't want to understand our body on our own. We don't want to learn how to do self-massage. We don't want to find a way to boost the levels of serotonin more by ourselves without needing somebody else to put pressure onto our muscles. There is an immense amount of disadvantages of having that kind of lifestyle. And again, I urge you to take a break and reconsider whether you actually want to do that. And if you need any help, feel free to shoot me a message on Instagram or Twitter. The links are down there in the description. Like this video if that's been valuable to you, and please do share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. Subscribe to this channel, and we're gonna talk to one another in the next video. It's been Edward. Au revoir.